shine. Coach the past scale, that's the mental way. Turning the hustle into something great. It is not just about the strength you hold, but how the inner grip begins to unfold. This is the prospect, podcast ground, where the secrets of the field are finally found. Building the athlete from the bone to the soul, taking the vision and reaching the goal.
All right, welcome to the Prospect Podcast. Our new intro. We've got two episodes with that, and it's a little. If you were living right down by the beach here, you'd appreciate it. Being a Jersey guy, there you go.
We get it a lot.
No doubt about it. Coach Schumann here, as always on the Prospect Podcast, and down in my bottom left here is Coach D. We're excited to. Coach DePasco to talk today with our fantastic guest, Dr. James Wittig, who is a fantastic guest to have on, someone that has really done some unbelievable things in the medical field. So we're excited to talk to him. He's an orthopedic oncologist and sarcoma surgeon. He was the chairman of the Department of Orthopedics at Morristown Medical. He was the director of orthopedic oncology and sarcoma surgery at Atlantic Health. He's former vice chairman of orthopedic surgery and chief of orthopedic oncology and sarcoma surgery at Hackensack University Medical. And he's held leadership positions as a chief of orthopedic oncology at Mount Sinai Medical. Is a Seton Hall grad, went to med school at NYU. Has a host of different residencies, including at Columbia Presbyterian, among others. Really is a fantastic doctor and a specialist who also treated at one time our gentleman right here below, Coach D. So it's we'll talk about all of that, and some of his specialties obviously are bone and soft tissue cancers and limb-sparing surgery, among other things within that field. But we're really excited to talk to him. So, Doc, it's great to have you on today.
Thank you. Thanks, Coach Schumann. It's awesome. Thank you, Derek. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited about this and to talk to you guys. And it's just amazing to have gotten the opportunity to take care of Derek, and from the time he was a teenager, and see him grow up now. And I can't believe it's 17 years.
This is wild.
They still think of him as a kid.
Yeah, most people do, that's for sure.
He didn't have a beard back then.
No, hell no. Trying. We were trying back then, Coach. We were trying really hard. But no, I appreciate it, Doc. I'm glad we could get you on. Your positions and whatnot. Not a lot of time to do things like this, but you've always made it. You've always made it a priority of yours to kind of give back and have some conversations like this. So we really look forward to it. Give us your bio a little bit, Doc. Kind of, we touched on it a little bit, but like kind of where you came, where you came from, how you grew up, like all that kind of stuff, and kind of how you got to where you are now.
Okay, good. So you want to know where and how it all started.
Yes.
So, right. It all started in Paterson, New Jersey, where I was born. And my father was a police officer. Ultimately, he rose through the ranks and became chief of police there. And my mother was a hairdresser. So everybody, asks me, where did you, what made you go into medicine? And, ever since I can remember, probably the earliest age I can remember is probably when I was around 3 years of age. And I remember I used to love this little black doctor's bag that I used to carry around. It was a little toy that you could get at Toys R Us. And I used to like to give everybody injections, listen to their heart with the stethoscope. I remember my pediatrician back then. And I just always remembered wanting to help everybody. And I remember an aunt of mine telling me that she asked me once when I was like 4 or 5 years old, what are you going to be? And I said, a doctor, and sure enough, it came through. I went to Catholic grammar school and Catholic high school. So, I was always taught about service to others. And whether it came innately or some of it was taught in environmental and being taught that throughout grammar school and high school, I don't know. But I always had a desire to help other people. And I found tremendous fulfillment in it. I don't think that there's any bigger joy than you can get in life than helping other people. I like helping people get better healthy wise and operating on them, but I also like helping other people succeed in life and use their talents to succeed. And, there's no bigger fulfillment than that. But, then I went on to high school and college. In college, I got very serious that I wanted to be a doctor. And, you have to have great grades to get into medical school, especially back then you had to get close to a 4.0 and excel on your exam. So I went to Seton Hall, again, a college that was really good for me because it was small and intimate, got a lot of attention, and you were really taught values about helping other people and being in service to others. And I excelled there. I got into medical school at NYU School of Medicine, which is one of the leading medical schools in the country. So I'm very, very fortunate. And I feel very grateful, that I got in there, and also grateful for one of my pre-med advisor at Seton Hall who pushed me to go there, and had an amazing experience at NYU. I don't think that there's really quite as many amazing experiences to learn and help others than you can get at NYU in Manhattan, which is now called NYU Langone. Then did my residency at Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center, which was also an amazing experience. And I think when I was a medical student, I really liked learning about the radiology of tumors and correlating it with the pathology or the biopsies, what you would see under a microscope,
Right.
and the diagnosis.
The science.
The science behind the sort of the diagnostics of it, right? And then I went into residency, and I worked with the surgeon who did the first limb-sparing or limb-saving surgeries for bone sarcomas, for osteosarcomas. And he moved his practice from Memorial Sloan Kettering over to Columbia Presbyterian when I became a resident. And I had an opportunity to work with him, and I was just amazed at what you could do. I was like, wow, I didn't know you could do this to a human being and save their legs this way. Put in these enormous replacements where you replace the whole femur or use liquid nitrogen in the body to kill tumors. I was just fascinated by that, fascinated by the impact that you can have on patients and lifelong impact. Watch them grow up and succeed in life and be cured and beat their cancers. And also I was, I was intrigued by, right, you operate all over the body. You don't focus just on one area. So you have to know the anatomy throughout the body. You have to be very creative with your operations. Every tumor is different. Even if it's 1 centimeter bigger, it can change the operation, or 1 centimeter in a different location. So the knowledge and skills that you got to utilize was tremendous. So I went on to a fellowship in Washington, D.C. at Washington Hospital Center, Washington Cancer Institute, and the National Institutes of Health. And we also worked at Children's National Medical Center. And I worked with Dr. Martin Mallower, who was actually a mentee of Ralph Markov, who was the originator, who I worked with at Columbia, originator of limb-sparing surgery. Dr. Mallower, took me under his wing. We were like family. He taught me everything he knew. And, the tremendous knowledge and skills and confidence I gained working with him was just amazing. I learned everything you could about orthopedic oncology and taking care of sarcoma patients and doing sarcoma surgery, anything that was possible that could be done. And I spent 2 years with him, as opposed to most fellowships in the country being 1 year. And he had explained to me why 2 years was important. Right? As an orthopedic oncologist, there's over 100 different types of surgeries you do. And comparing that to like total joint replacement, where there might be 4 different types of surgeries. A lot of the conditions are rare. A lot of the types of surgeries are rarely performed. So for instance, some very dramatic surgeries like removing huge pieces of the pelvis, or even having to do large amputations that involve the pelvis, that might come along 3 times a year. So to really get that experience, he wanted me to spend the 2 years, which I agreed, and I'm very happy that I did that. Right, it really gave me the skills that I needed to really take care of patients thoroughly, and not really requiring like a team of surgeons to do the surgery with me. Then I went on to NYU. I went back to the hospital that I trained at. Dr. Joseph Zuckerman, who's still the chairman to today, gave me an opportunity to start my practice there. I started my practice, and it was amazing. I did over, this is unheard of in the field of orthopedic oncology, but my first year I did over 200 orthopedic oncology cases. I started a clinic at Bellevue Hospital for the underserved and the vulnerable patients who didn't have access in Manhattan. That clinic is still around these days. My first year there, I took care of over 100 patients. These patients came from all over the world to Manhattan to be taken care of. I remember taking care of a kid from Egypt, and they all had extreme presentations of their tumors because they had been neglected. So I always wondered, like, what happened to these people before I was here? I guess people just did amputations on them, and they didn't really get high-level care or the high-level specialty care. So that was one thing that I was very proud of, and I'm proud that that is still in existence today and still thriving. After about 6 or 7, and one of my experiences there was really teaching the residents there. And NYU Langone Orthopedics has, one of the top 5 orthopedic residency programs in the country. So I got an opportunity to take care of a tremendous number of residents. Teaching them was extremely fulfilling. But then I was called by a mentor of mine from when I was in residency, who became the chairman at Mount Sinai, and asked me to move to Mount Sinai and take the chief position there, which I did. And that was also a fantastic experience. Every experience that I've had throughout life has been one where I've been able to advance in my administrative roles, but also advance in taking care of more patients and having a bigger impact on patients, as well as the orthopedic community and the orthopedic residents. So I had started a New Jersey practice also, which was part of NYU and Mount Sinai. It was an extension. Ultimately, I was courted to become the vice chair and chief of orthopedic oncology at Hackensack University Medical Center and the John Thorpe Cancer Center. The John Thorpe Cancer Center is a world-renowned cancer center here in New Jersey.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
It was built by Dr. Andrew Pecora, who put it all together many years ago. He's a friend of mine, and he recruited me to be the chief of orthopedic oncology there. Dr. Pecora and I worked together for many years taking care of patients. He's very innovative in his approach to giving chemotherapy and novel treatments for patients. So I had a tremendous experience there. And then I was ultimately asked to lead more orthopedics at Morristown Medical Center in Atlantic System, and assumed my positions there. When I took my positions there, I was asked to develop a 5-year strategic plan. I managed to accomplish my 5-year goals in 4 years, despite a little bit of interference from COVID.
Yeah, slight interference.
Little interference there. And then I stayed on for a few more years there and realized like I wanted more beyond there. And it's very typical in academic medicine. It's almost built in that once you do 25 years in medicine, that you take a year off or so to learn more, to decompress a little bit, and then to start over. So I really wanted to take a sabbatical where I could learn a little bit more. I had started writing a textbook. I had already been involved in writing 2 other textbooks, and I wanted to finish a textbook that I was writing that teaches mostly residents and medical students, but other orthopedic surgeons or orthopedic oncologists, how to diagnose and treat sarcomas. And every year I do what's called the Mount Sinai Pathology course. It's been going on for 25 years, where I get up and I lecture and I kind of train residents how to diagnose bone and soft tissue tumors and cancers sort of the Socratic method, and it sticks, and people have always liked it. So I put together a book of 111 orthopedic oncology cases to teach residents and medical students that my own very process of going through the diagnosis and management. So sort of accomplished that, and there's a couple other things. I really wanted to entertain a holistic approach to taking care of patients. So I wanted to learn a little bit more about that, how, my approach is really focuses on brain, body, soul, and spirit. And I think putting all those together, you take optimal care of the patients and have the best outcomes for them. So there were some things that I wanted to learn that I've learned over the last year. And then I always had a strong desire for helping children with cancer and their families more. Some things that I noticed was really the mental health effects of being diagnosed with a child with cancer or on a child, and how discord amongst the family that probably comes from that. Number one, of course, being scared that your child is going to die, right? I can't think of any bigger fear in the world or bigger trauma than having your child diagnosed with cancer, but also the financial burden that comes with that and the financial stress on a family, not only right with the medical bills, but they have to take off of work. They have to start eating differently. They have to eat in the hospital. They have to spend nights in a hotel. They have to come back and forth. Get a babysitter. They have other children, right? There's so much stress and other burdens that sometimes it tears down marriages. And I've seen the children who are in a more stressful environment. Of course, it's going to be stressful no matter what, but where it's overtly stressful and the child's experiences, how more poorly these children do. So it was a goal of mine to set up the Pediatric Cancer Foundation of New Jersey as a not-for-profit. We're currently working on the not-for-profit status, but to raise money and help offset the financial burden, but help also provide holistic healthcare that's not necessarily available through their insurance plans. And naturally, we do have a big contingency in New Jersey where they need charity care for their care in the different hospital systems. They're either underinsured or uninsured. And then also I wanted to provide a little bit of grant money for medical students and residents who enjoy or who are participating in research dedicated to pediatric oncology, and help sponsor them going to present their research or get them the supplies that they need to do that. And that will be part of the foundation. It'll be a smaller part, maybe 15% or so of where the funds go, but still, I think a necessary component for our students in New Jersey that would be helpful. And that brings us to today.
That's quite a journey. Amazing stuff that you've been able to do. Talk a little bit about what you're doing now, where you're kind of marrying the holistic with the actual treatment, and what you're kind of looking at from that standpoint, because that's become more and more of like a topic with cancer treatment, but in a lot of things, a lot of different aspects. I mean, even in the stuff that we do a lot of with athletics, like as far as development and those kind of things. Talk a little bit about kind of the marriage of that world, right? Because obviously cancer treatment for a long time was like a certain way, right? You innovated a lot of things. I mean, just knowing Derek's story, a little bit about Derek's story, it's amazing what you were able to do with him. And obviously you've done that with probably thousands of patients. But talk a little bit about some of the things that you're seeing that and marrying those two worlds and kind of innovations to help patients along in those kind of cancers.
right? So think of it as, right, your brain controls your body, and your brain can turn on good genes and your brain can turn on bad genes. And good genes get turned on with lower stress and heightened emotions of joy, happiness, satisfaction, love, right? Those turn on good genes. And I see, the brain and your brain health being very important in mostly three different areas. One is when you have a disease, right, and using the brain to help cure or recuperate from that disease. Two is just optimizing the general health of a person, right, who is not sick and who doesn't have disease. And then three is in your areas as a coach for peak performance. And there's lots of different techniques. One of the first things that I did when I started my sabbatical is I signed up for a hypnosis course. I'm still taking it. It's going to finish in a month to get certified in hypnosis. But things like hypnosis, meditation, right? Things that will reduce stress and get rid of the noise in your life and help you change your thoughts to thoughts that feel good as opposed to traumatic thoughts. So you can imagine being diagnosed with cancer, right, Derek? Right, you were a kid back then, and right, what comes to your mind? It's immediately traumatic to you, and you almost can't stop thinking about it, and that's not healthy for you. It's a protective mechanism,
right?
Your brain goes in loops, but you got to break those loops, and you got to focus on being in a healthy state, right? And all these different techniques can be utilized. There's many different techniques that I've been looking at to help drive that brain into the healthy state, from hypnosis to meditation to utilizing real-time EEG analysis of the brain with different headsets you can wear that will give you neurofeedback while you're listening to music, and will adjust the music to keep your brain waves in the healing state. So you have 4 different types of brain waves, more or 5, right? You have beta, which is, we're in probably beta right now, talking back and forth with each other, right? But then you have alpha, which is a more relaxed but alert state. And you're particularly in alpha when you're waking up in the morning or you're going to sleep at night. Then there's theta, which is that state between alpha and deep sleep, where you could be lucid dreaming. And alpha and theta is where you can reprogram your brain, reprogram the software in your brain. So those are the states that you kind of want to get into with different techniques, whether it's hypnosis or it's meditation or guided meditations, or these different music programs with EEG or biofeedback, neurofeedback, to train the brain to get into there and for you to be able to do it on your own without it ultimately, and elevate your emotions. And when you can elevate the emotions, particularly in these horrible situations, you're definitely going to have a better outcome than living in despair and anger and without hope, right? You have to, and as a doctor, right, that's one of the things, no matter what, I have to instill hope in my patients.
Right.
And trust me that they're going to get better, right? Because if
no doubt
I don't instill hope in them, I'm killing them.
Right.
I'm not doing them any good if I'm not instilling hope in them.
Right. Sometimes the diagnosis in itself is you don't even get the opportunity to treat them because, look, and it's from a personal experience too. Like, a lot of people, right, like, that are uneducated, they hear the C word, right? They hear cancer and automatically it's a death sentence. Okay. Right. They always think the worst of the worst, right? Where your job is to now, hey, like, this is treatable, right? Like, we are going to take the necessary steps, but you have to do your part to get better as well. And part of that is putting yourself, even for as hard as it is and as difficult it is, into a mental state of, hey, it's going to be all right. I'm in great hands, right? Who's going to help me treat this? Not only the actual surgery or whatever that's going, but my brain has to be in the right mindset to do this, because without that, the strongest muscle, right, like in your body, the brain, like that negative will only chip away slowly and take away from what we're ultimately trying to accomplish. And look, I referenced it off air before we got on, like the bedside manner aspect that you've always presented yourself with is second to none. And most doctors aren't like that, whether it's their own kind of zone that they have to get in to separate from what they do so that emotions don't take over and then you become too invested in what it is. But you've always played that that line of back and forth where, you know, you didn't feel like you were talking to a doctor. You felt like you were talking to someone who was truly invested in what he was doing. Because, you know, I feel like a lot of times people you go to the doctor, you're just another number coming in, right? It's just, hey, this is what you're getting. Like, nobody takes that personal time. I understand with surgery, it's a little different, right? And especially for some of these surgeries that are not the norm. It's not your, oh, you tore an ACL, let's go fix it, right? Like, you're invested in each one of your patients and your caseload, kind of how you move forward with that. I think one of the things that we've really seen come into the forefront now with, you know, our athletes or whoever we're working with is the mental side of everything, right? Like that getting in a zone, it's more in the limelight, it's being trained more, right? Like the mental fortitude that it takes to kind of, you know, be at your peak. And we're seeing now so many people really incorporate that, whether it be, you know, teams that are, you know, like talking about it with their players and things like that. I think that whole idea, it just kind of comes full circle when you're talking about now medical surgery, right? Like you're literally linking it. Like, look, if you stay positive, you have better chances of, you know, healing and doing those types of things. I think that for you, coming from your world, right, with the day in, day out negative diagnoses over and over, to now incorporate that, I think just shows, you know, the importance of it, right? That you're now going to focus even more so on these certain healing methods that aren't just, hey, here's a pill or here's the surgery that you have to do. That's going to be part of it. But the increase in percentage of looking at the mental side of it and really utilizing, you know, staying in that positive state and what's kind of surrounding it, I think is extremely important, right? Am I wrong in saying that?
No, it's super important for the, you know, for the outcomes. And, you know, I see it as just being a human being toward patient, right? I see it as just being another human being and being compassionate and empathetic. And how would I want to be treated, or my child be treated, if I was in this situation? But you know, the first thing that I like to do is emphasize, like, I am here to cure you, right? That is my goal. It's to cure you, right? And there are things that happen in life that you cannot control, but there are things that you can control that are going to give you a better outcome. And you have to think about 4 pillars that are really important in anything: peak performance, maintaining your health overall. And what are the 4 things that you can control, or you can work on controlling, is exercise, diet and nutrition, sleep. Sleep is very important, right? And if you can't sleep, then we got to figure out a way to get you to sleep. And then comes in the invisible one, which is the brain, which is the stress reduction, the meditation, the hypnosis, if you need, whatever we can do to get you into a positive frame of mind and feel and believe you are going to be cured. Your limb is going to be, in my business, right, or my practice, your limb is going to be saved, and you're going to have a good functional limb, and you're going to recuperate well, and you're not going to have pain, and you're not going to be in pain when we take care of you, right? But I'm like, you let me focus about the disease, you focus on being healthy, right? And you have to instill that confidence in them that I'm your biggest advocate. I'm your biggest cheerleader. I'm your, right? And right? And you're going to trust me in that, right? But I want you to take care of all these other things. And naturally, right, it's the trauma, and you got to overcome that initial trauma of what you've got going on. And as a doctor, I feel like that's a cancer doctor, that's one of the biggest things you have to work on. I've known a lot of doctors who are very compassionate. My mentor, Dr. Mallower, he was an extremely compassionate man. He felt, maybe I learned this all from him also, how he spoke to patients. I learned a great deal from him. But, I think nowadays with the corporatization of medicine, a lot, like, I don't even want to go down that road.
No.
But a lot of, right, doctors who are working for hospitals, or even like, it's a double-edged sword, right? It's a blessing and a curse for a doctor to be great at what they do, because then all the patients want to come and see them. And some doctors have a hard time saying no, right? Right. So that your schedule gets flooded, and then the insurance companies don't pay enough money for you to get all the other resources, or you work for a hospital system where they want you seeing one patient every 15 minutes for 8 hours, then doing all your charts at the end of the day, working on the right. So I think it takes, particularly the last, I'd say 10 years or so, it's taken a lot of the fulfillment from doctors, in terms of taking care of patients, and they kind of go through things as a robot.
Yeah.
But again, very important, right? Like regardless, right? You can make excuses regardless. When I'm in that room with a patient, I tell them, like, I might be late to your appointment, but when you're in the room with me, right? I'm sitting down, I'm listening to you only. I'm not thinking about anything else except you. I tell the parents will sometimes ask me, will you come out during the surgery and let me know how things are going? I'm like, absolutely not. I'm focusing entirely on your child when I'm taking care of them. I'm not even thinking
no updates.
I'm not thinking of you.
No, I get it. It's you have to be that super vigilant.
Has with the insurance aspect, you feel that a lot of times because all of these health systems have, like, there used to be a lot of separate health systems, right? But a lot of them have bought a lot of other hospitals and organizations, right? Medical organizations. And do you think that the merging of a lot of these things, I mean, there's a positive and a negative, obviously, to everything, but do you think that has affected healthcare because it's become such a conglomerate in a lot of cases, and affects what some doctors are able to do?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It takes out a lot of the personal nature,
right,
of taking care of patients, but even personal nature and interactions between, who the administrators are, who run the hospitals, and the individual doctors. And more gets focused on the bottom line and living according to an annual budget. Right. And how are budgets determined? They're predicted. Right.
It's not the actuality of it. Like, nobody predicted COVID, right? Like,
right. It's just best guesses, right? So with COVID, everybody was overjoyed with me because I thought of a strategic plan, right? We were down in human resources. We didn't have enough nurses to work. We didn't have enough people to run central sterilization. Right. So they asked, right, they're like, in July, we were at 30% of our volume of orthopedic patients. Right. We've only compared to the previous year.
Right.
Right. So we had from July to December. Right. And naturally, from my perspective as a doctor, there's been so many patients who've been neglected of their care, not the cancer patients, but other orthopedic patients. I see it as we've got to optimize our volume here to take care of as many people who've been neglected. Right? There's people who are sitting in a wheelchair who can't move for now 6 months, and they're totally deconditioned. That has effects on their heart. It has effects on their brain. Right? We got to get that going. From a hospital perspective, they're like, we got to make our money back. Right.
Right.
So, I developed a strategic plan to optimize human resources. And basically, to make it very simple, it wasn't anything difficult. I just said, when we do total joint replacements and we do spine surgery, there's a tremendous amount of instruments that come in that have to be cleaned and properly sterilized. Nurses were on 8-hour shifts, and nurses are somewhat specialized to spine or joints or what I do. I said, let's change around the schedule a little bit. Let's let nurses do 12-hour shifts. Let the surgeons have their rooms all day, and let's just do total joint replacements Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and spine surgery Tuesdays, Thursdays. And that'll make it much easier with getting the trays sterilized, getting the trays in to take care of patients. And I also said, let's start downsizing. And I worked with another orthopedic surgeon who helped me do this, downsize some of the trays, because these trays are
massive. Yeah.
Right. And you don't need all that equipment really to do joint replacements. You should be able, like if you're doing a joint replacement, sales reps typically used to bring in every size, right? But you should be able to determine like within three sizes of a patient based on their x-rays, right? So we changed things around. And by the end of December, we accomplished 90% of the patient volume that we had the year before. So I felt, from my perspective, I felt good about that because there were these patients waiting, agonizing in pain, and we got them taken care of expeditiously before the end of the year. And then we recuperated the remainder the following year, after January 1st.
And because do you think it's helped you, Doc, being on both sides of it from an administrative position and the, boots on the ground surgeon in the rooms? Like, do you think that's helped you kind of in your career move forward to understand the budgets of things and all of that kind of? Because, you see doctors, a lot of guys, like it's the same with kind of like teaching, right? Like teaching, you're a teacher, you're in the classroom, but in order to make more money, you got to go be a principal or you got to do something of that nature, right? And I know for me personally, like I never wanted that because I loved being in the classroom. You've kind of done both, right? Do you think that's helped you in your career move forward, kind of being on the administrative side of it, understanding that, and also being in, still doing your surgeries in that regard?
Yeah, I think so, from a few different perspectives, right? So one thing that I knew going along was that for me to get everything like I wanted for my patients, that I would have to run things, and I would either have to do that in a private practice setting,
right,
or I would have to do it where I was the boss and I could influence the administration on what was appropriate for taking care of my patients. So, for instance, a lot of times at the other institutions, I would have to bring a sick patient to the OR at midnight, which wasn't good for the patient, wasn't good for me, wasn't good for the hospital, right? But it took me becoming chairman to convince the hospital that that wasn't a good thing. My patients the emergency cases need to follow when I'm in the operating room, and not me finish my surgeries at 6 or 7 and then come back at midnight to take care of a very sick cancer patient. Right? So there were things like that, or to get the amount of resources that I needed in my office, right, where I was more influential in a chairman role, or the support services for the patients. And we adopted the success of my personal practice to other areas of orthopedics to optimize the care in orthopedics, which I think that was very influential. But from the opposite perspective, the administrative perspective, I saw what I needed to do to show them positive returns on the business plans, or at least break even returns, right? And why this would be good in many different ways from the hospital, and understand it from that perspective. So I knew what I had to put together, right? Whereas if I didn't have those administrative skills, I might not understand what I would have to put together to show them that this is going to be good for them. I might have the idea like, oh yeah, this is a great idea, and I love this for my patients. But you also have to prove many things financially, that it's not going to bankrupt the hospital. So for instance, when I got to my latest job, they didn't have any robotic joint replacements.
Right. I remember that being a big thing for you, like kind of behind the times almost, not like too far ahead where we're talking like, AI, not like craziness, but like just the kind of being on par with kind of where the world was going. I remember that being a big thing for you moving into that new role.
Yeah, exactly. Like they granted, right? There's surgeons out there that do so many joint replacements. A robot isn't going to help them. They're like a robot themselves. They're phenomenal. And we had a lot of them in my last job. They're phenomenal doctors, phenomenal surgeons. But a lot of the new trainees coming out, they only do it on the robot. Now it's important for them to know without the robot, but we have to attract them to work at the hospital. There's other surgeons that maybe instead of them doing 800 surgeries a year, they're doing like 150 to 200, right? The consistency in their cuts might not be the same as the person doing 800 surgeries. So that's where the robot would come in helpful for them. So, but I had to come up with a business plan for it and show that it wasn't going to cost the hospital money, that it was going to bring in more revenue to the hospital and bring them more patients, and that they were going to have better outcomes, better safety, less risk. All those things put together lead to positive outcomes and positive financial cash flow, So, and that's the business side of medicine that's important.
No, that makes a ton of sense. I'm curious if there's like innovations now, like with AI coming about and, number one in your field, but in orthopedic medicine as a whole, that might change the way, maybe, on the cancer side, cancers that get cured or things like joint replacement, is that become easier, more efficient? Maybe is there stuff like, the stuff like stem cells become a better version of that? I don't know. I'm curious if technology, because I read so much about it with AI, and I don't know, somehow I'm subscribed to some Facebook page that I get all these like amazing innovations that I see that come through in medicine in these fields. And it's amazing. I don't know how much of it's rolled out yet, but like all these things that are coming out like so rapidly within the field of medicine, a lot of it because of, I guess, AI and maybe CRISPR and obviously some of the robotics innovations.
Yeah. So the stuff that we're seeing is amazing, right? And it's slowly being incorporated.
Okay.
There's so many tremendous advantages with AI. It's not going to replace doctors, but it's going to help augment their care, their knowledge, their efficiency, sort of like a double check on some things, improve their patients' records. So one area that I'm very much interested in is offsetting the administrative burden of doctors.
The charting, the paperwork, right? Like all that stuff that kind of takes away from what your actual craft is. And it's, in my eyes, and I'm not cutting you off, Doc. I just, in comparing it to being like a high school football coach, right? Like, which is kind of funny to, an orthopedic oncologist to a high school football coach, but the breaking down of like game film and the tedious task of like charting what the play is and all of those kind of things, like the same way you have to follow a track and literally fill out paperwork as to what was administered, what you did, like all of those things that kind of, I don't want to say take away from, but are just kind of there that have to be done in order to check off another box, right? Is that a comparison? That's it. I mean, I think it works, I obviously not on the same level.
Yeah.
But
like you could forget one word in a patient's office note, and immediately it changes the way the patient or the insurance company is billed, right? Like everything nowadays is about legalities and billing. Instead of being, the office note used to be a way for doctors to communicate with each other. Now it's like so specific in terms of like what level you can code a patient at or whatever. But what I see AI useful for is from the very first minute that person is touched by your office, starting to interact with the patient, getting all their information into the chart, doing a pre-analysis of it, the patient coming in and seeing you. Right now I'm trying to work on an AI clone of myself that, say the patient is sitting in the waiting area and I'm 30 minutes late for their appointment. I pop up on their screen and I'm apologetic, telling them that I'm spending time with another patient. But here's this meditation that you can listen to, or please talk to the front desk person. They'll give you a voucher for coffee or something like that. Right? But then they get into the room and AI immediately starts listening to our conversation, making the note, right? Gives them the reminders. Whatever it is, it's going to offset the time that I have to spend doing that so I could spend more time with patients. And let me just give you an example of what my daily week was like, the last 3 or 4 years.
Oh,
I did an analysis. I got my time in the operating room, and per week, I was 40 hours in the operating room with 20% of the time after 8 p.m. at night. I did some surgeries on Saturdays. I then saw patients 2 days a week. And I did the chairman job, the medical director job, and the residency program director job. So I'm one of the people who was most desperate need of AI to help offset the administrative burden.
Right.
And between me and my physician assistants, we would see 100 patients in the office a week.
Right. Which is incredible for the level of care and whatnot.
But every time I went in with a patient, right, I closed that door and they have my entire attention. But you need to offload that administrative burden in all aspects. And also, kind of like AI is going to be very useful in monitoring patients before, during, and after their surgeries.
Right.
Almost being a navigator and alerting your nurse. Instead of needing 3 nurses, you might only need 1. But we'll alert your nurse to things that are coming up, either by monitoring their wearables, asking patients questions every day. Like what I would love, my patients in the hospital the morning after surgery, all of a sudden, 9 o'clock when they open up their phone, I pop up greeting them in the morning. Hey, Derek, how are you doing? Everything went perfectly with your surgery yesterday. And this is going to be the plan for you today and the plan for the week. And you just get in touch with me if you have any problem. Let's say it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and Derek's in pain and the nurses aren't coming to see him yet. He pulls up his phone and says, Dr. Wittig, I'm in severe pain for an hour now. I haven't gotten any pain medicine, right? I pop up on your phone, then my agent contacts me. I'm either in immediate touch with you or I'm calling the nurse. Can you please get Derek his pain medicine?
Right.
So I see it very useful from all those situations. And it's going to be helpful in helping to plan surgeries, plan how to build prostheses, more customizing and tailoring surgeries, curing cancers. We're going to, I'm sure we're going to be starting to develop drugs now based on, all the vaccines from COVID, that was based on AI.
Right.
How the vaccines were developed so quickly, right? That's how we're coming up with new cancer drugs, is based on that. And we're probably going to ultimately end up getting rid of animal testing, which I think would be wonderful. I'm a big animal advocate, and it just kills me to think that we the way we have to treat animals to, naturally it's in as humanely way as possible, but just the thought of it, I'm cringed by it. But I think AI is going to be very instrumental in helping healthcare, and hopefully decreasing other expenses in the hospital. The biggest expense in the hospital is the administrators.
Right.
Right.
Hey, yeah, they make the most money.
right? And if you could decrease this administrative burden, right, it's going to allow more money for the actual patients and nurses, the people taking direct care of the patients.
Agreed. I think that's a huge part of it. Like the guy I used to go to for when I lived in North Jersey, who was my general practitioner, he went from having like one or two people at the front desk to having like 7. And that obviously just because of the paperwork. And it was, he was saying that he went from thinking, he could retire at some point to like, he's got to keep working because the way that it is, it had to become part of originally wasn't part of a system, had to become part of a system in order to survive. Right.
Right.
And that's a general practitioner, which is different than the specialist, obviously, but it kind of is, it's interesting in that part that is currently needed, AI could maybe eventually allow doctors to be more doctors again, because of the fact that some of that burden can be taken off and then go back to problem solving versus, XYZ, insurance company didn't get this part right. And AI might be able to get that where they can more problem solve, right? Do much more along the lines of problem solving versus daily tasks that don't have anything.
That's a better way to put it. Daily tasks, right? Like the mundane things. We know they're important, right? But just, look, Doc, I can remember you even back then, like you were always dictating, right? Like you always were recording so that when you could go and had to sit down in front of your computer, like you were going to get it word specific because again, especially as a specialty surgeon, right? Like that insurance stuff needs to be in line or they're not covering it or they're not, you know what I mean? Like just the way it's all approached. It is so unfortunate that that's the way medicine is approached, right? Because you have to cross your T's, dot your I's just to get coverage and do all this other kind of stuff. It really is, but goes back to just like, who you are starting those clinics for the less fortunate that don't have the ability to do this or, those types of things, teaching others to kind of do that along the line. And now even in moving forward, you embracing the technology aspect of it, whether it's a robotic, tool or the AI aspect of it to kind of get back to what a doctor really needs to focus on. And that is the treatment of the patient, right? I think just kind of, there's like, you kind of look at it and say, I wish more doctors were open-minded that, whereas some would look at it in almost like, well, how long before I'm phased out, right? And that's not the way. You're looking at it as a tool to help you move forward and get back to doing what you're doing. Whereas, I'm curious, colleague-wise and other doctors in that world, do they have that same approach or are they on the other side of it like, hey, this is going to hurt us and take away from us? What's kind of the doctor world when it comes to AI? Are they going to embrace it like majority-wise or is it more of like, like, I don't really want that to happen?
I think the majority will embrace it, but it's going to take some time to institute, and it's going to depend on the expense of everything starting out.
Right.
And naturally, with everything, the expense goes down over the course of time. Like, for instance, the electronic health record that was, right? There's some electronic health records that are just unaffordable for a practice. And then there's some that are affordable, but over time, the ones that are unaffordable are becoming a little bit more affordable.
Right.
Still a little bit, but I think it's going to be the same adoption with AI. And I think that you're going to have AI adopted into private practices first.
Of course, right? Like, which is it's kind of where a lot of that technology stuff really starts, right? In the private world before it gets to everything else, right? Because, they have somebody that can write that check or do, you know what I mean? Like there's just like less hoops to jump through, I guess, maybe in its institution. People will go to that private practice knowing like, hey, they have this, I want this. Right. Some of that type of like almost like a specialty. Dave kind of like, hey, I'm going to go to private school, not public school. Right. Like, because they do this type of thing, like, and I'm willing to pay for it. You see a lot of that work in the private practice world. But for you, like the places you've worked have been pretty much like general, you know what I mean? Like open to anybody that walks through this door and then obviously gets steered your way as a specialty. right? Which is, look, that's how I found you, right? Like my team doctor from my high school or from my college football team said, hey, you have this, I want you to go see this guy, right? And it was, okay, this is different, right? Like now we got to go see, going into the city, and that's kind of how it's steered, right? Like from the public to the private as it gets more intense. But I just think like the open-mindedness of it all, ultimately you want your doctor focused on the main thing, and that's healing you, not on, oh my God, I have so many charts to fill and I have to sit in there. It's why your team, I think you built your team the way it is, right? Because look, your administrative assistants and those others that were in the room with you, I mean, it was like talking to you, right? Like you all spoke the same language. Can you talk about that a little bit, Doc? Because we talk about, look, we deal with team sports, right? And the vertical alignment where it's got to come from the top down, whether it be, your administrators as a coach or the people above you kind of like, doing that. Talk about how you've always built a team around you with like-minded people, and, how you keep that team camaraderie. Because if that's one thing too, Dave, like if you look at like Dr. Witt, like his team itself, like they're tight knit. They're like, you know what I mean? They all like, they're very personable, but they're like, it's the same type of vibe with each of them, whether Doc's in the room or whether he's not. So talk about that a little bit, because we talk about team sports being the ultimate like builder of character and building of young men and women, and how we would love this country to be focused on through the game of, through sports and team and all those kind of things that it teaches you about life. Like you've done the exact same thing with your medical team. So talk about that a little bit, Doc.
Yeah. So, you realize, well, let me touch on your first point that you asked me about. I definitely think AI is going to be instituted in a way so that it unloads burden on doctors and the stress, so that the doctors can have more compassion and not feel stressed while they're talking to the patients and spend that extra 5 minutes. So right. I think that's where what I'm hoping to see. And I think it will, because you could imagine, right? You get a denial from an insurance company about a CAT scan for a patient, right? And they want a peer review, and then they refuse to speak to your PA or your nurse. Then you call them back and you're waiting on the phone for an hour, only for them to tell you that they have to escalate it to another peer review. Then you're in the room with the patient and they call back and they insist on speaking to you now. You got to walk out of the room and then right? It's craziness. So hopefully a lot of that is mitigated. But in terms of the team, right, you have to realize, like, taking care of patients, especially complex care and complex surgery, requires a team approach. And naturally, I choose certain people on my team that I think are knowledgeable and have skills, but I choose them more because I think that they're compassionate and empathetic people. And if they don't know something, they're going to learn it. And that they're also going to take my lead on things, trusting me that I know how to take care of patients, and I know that I'm at the top of my field and I know how to take care of patients. And, I train each one of them individually, but I also make sure that they know that we have a patient-centric approach, that nobody's job can be there if the patients aren't going to come to us.
Right.
So it's very important that we have a patient-centric approach for the patient's outcomes, that they have the best outcomes and that they have the best experience with us. So naturally, there's different protocols that I set up, but I also make sure that each member of the team knows that each is an individual and each has their strengths and weaknesses. And where one of them might be strong in one aspect and weak in a certain aspect, another one might be strong where they're weak, and that is advantageous to the practice overall, right? Because then that person, let's say, who's a very strong communicator and enjoys spending an hour on the phone with patients, right, will spend that time, and that patient needs them to be educated on what they're going to go through, to be reassured, and again, calm their stress, calm their fears, right?
Just that conversation alone can take it to a different level of, oh wow, this individual is actually talking to me like I'm a human, not just rushing me off the phone because they have to get to 10 others, right? Like they're spending that time. And then for the doctor themselves or that person, they enjoy doing that. So they're going to do it better when they enjoy it.
Exactly. Now, maybe that same person might not enjoy being in the operating room as much.
Right.
The other person where that communication was more of their weakness really loves being in the operating room, and their technical skills are great.
Absolutely.
Right. So, and I had, that's one thing that I had to make sure everybody understand, like it's a piece of the puzzle and everybody fits together. But from a leader's perspective, right, I treat them each with kindness and respect. And I treat them, like they're my work family, and I always make sure that they understand that each one of them is very important.
Right.
And I make sure, naturally there's even a hierarchy in the office, right? My PAs and my nurse, who is Helen Wittig, happened to be my cousin, so she would naturally, just by being my cousin, spend extra time with patients, but that's just built into Helen. She's a very empathetic and compassionate person. Right. So Helen would spend an hour on the phone with patients.
Yeah.
Helen used to be there from 7, 8 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night talking to patients. Right. And so, so that's all very helpful, but actually it would have to trickle down, right? The physician assistants who were at the top clinically would have to train and encourage and be nice and encouraging and respectful to the ones that fell under them. Right. And trickle down all the way to where we had research assistants in the office. We had people at every stage of the phase. Sometimes I had high school kids in the office doing work or shadowing so that they could get their hours in to apply for college, and college students for medical school, and medical students for residency. Residents, we had the
entire team. Yeah, you had the whole gamut. You ran it. You know what I mean? Like everybody had and I think it compares to sports teams in such an amazing fashion, right? Because everybody just has to do their job and understand their role and not be too big or think too little to kind of, or they had to stay in their lane in order for all of us to kind of be successful and our patients to kind of understand that. And I think that's something that it seeps right through the second you walk into the office, right? Like, Dave, how many times have you been to a doctor's office and you're like, oh, we know what we're getting into. I'm just like a number. They're trying to get you in, push you out. You know what I mean? But from the second you walk in and talk to that person at the front desk, there's an overall vision and an approach to it where I'm really important, right? Because every person goes into a doctor's office, that's the only thing that matters. I don't care about anybody else or whatever it is. This is what matters right now. I'm trying to get healed. I'm trying to feel better. And that's, usually you're dealing with people that are, at some of the most miserable points of their life, and all they can see is the negative moving forward. You walk in and the first thing you deal with is a bitchy, front desk person, and you're already turned off. Right. And how many times have we seen it? Just that little piece of it, right, being positive and uplifting, and that there's already a sense of relief as I sit down in this as I sit down in the waiting room, waiting for Doc to show up, right? I'm already kind of put at ease a little bit in one of the most anxiety-filled situations already in your life, right? So just that vertical alignment and how the building of a team, I think, relates so much to sports and our young athletes and our young people that we're dealing with, team, all of that stuff, how everybody has to work together and understand their role. But it's something that you have to present to them from the jump. Here's your role, right? And then the self-awareness to understand your strengths and weaknesses. And we're going to help you take these weaknesses and make them better, but we're going to rely on your strengths as well, because it's what's good for the group. I think that's so important, in your field, right? Where that stuff matters, right? And you also see it the residents are trying to become, everybody's trying to shift and get to a certain, because everybody has goals. But the good of the group really kind of, if you're still going to get your individual success, right? But you have to do this first. I think that's just so like pivotal.
Yeah, no, exactly. You like you said, the first person that patient greets on the phone or in person is super important, right? They have to be greeted with kindness, smile, happiness, and know that patient is important. And one thing that I teach everybody, especially when we're taking care of a child, right before we do that child's surgery, I pause. A lot of times we'll say a prayer. I'm fairly spiritual. I believe God guides my hands during the surgery and guides me in decision making. But very important, I have everybody pause and realize what the parents are feeling.
Yeah.
And how much the parents have trusted me and my team, not only me, the whole team, with the care of their child, their baby, right? And what that means and how important that is, and that they're picking us over picking other people. And that's the biggest compliment in the world. And they're relying on us to save their baby's life. And, their baby could be 25, 26 years old. No matter what, you're still their baby, right? Save their life and save their limb and have them come out okay, have them come out good, right? And I make sure that everybody pauses and thinks about that, because everybody's always in a rush and, let's get moving, and right. And I make sure that I emphasize that, because that's what it's all about. We are all there to take the best care that we can of patients and have them get the best outcomes, the highest degree of safety, and the best quality. And if you do that, everything else falls into place. Everything is all about the patient. Anything that we talk about in the operating room is about the patient. I have residents that sometimes come to surgery, and I ask them what medications the patients are on, what's their previous medical history. If they don't know it, that's a bad thing.
Right.
I have a very serious discussion with them, right, at real time, like how unacceptable that is, right? Because even when you're learning, right, you're not there to just show up and help or do the surgery. You're there to take care of a patient. You need to know everything about them. And as part of the team, I'm relying on you knowing everything about this patient right before the surgery. I know everything, but I want to make sure that the entire team.
Right. Yeah. Hey, look, the quarterback knows the plays, but if the receivers and the linemen don't know what's going on, you know what I mean? Like it's that type of, you know what I mean? Like as a coach, I can tell you what to do, and I'm sure you could still do it at a very high level.
This is life and death, and this is that's yeah. That's what's so
it's a
important.
human being. It's life and death. It's a human being, right?
It's not a game. It's real life.
Yeah.
We're inflicting trauma on this patient to cure them, right? Making an incision, cutting their muscles, doing whatever we're doing. That is controlled trauma, right?
Through the fascia, Dave. Through the fascia. I just say that because we've recently, Dave's been on a deep dive about fascia training and the ability of the fascia to kind of help you and aid you in your training and whatnot. So we have this whole thing because I explained to him like part of my surgery was like Dr. Witt had to like cut right through it, and it's still what I mean. It's a thing, and luckily like my personal experience with it, right, like quote unquote easy, right? Like went through nothing, just took care of it, took out the tumor, all that kind of stuff, right? But for some of the stuff that you've done, and for me, even being at the age that I was at, old enough to kind of understand it and be able to work through it, where if you've had patients that are, from every age, every level, right? And where these sarcomas, present themselves, whether it be, mine, which was in my right forearm, but like, you talked about femurs, pelvises, like you've removed things from spots. It's like, how the hell did you even get to that point and do those things? But, you touched on it a little bit. It's every surgery is its own beast, and everyone is different. And you've had to create surgeries on your own just to be success, just to hope for success, right? Like, and that's, I think, one of the hardest things too that I would see being a doctor is like, we can still put together the best plan and understand it, but once we get in there, we don't really know what's going on, right? Like, we have the images, we have the pictures, we have all that stuff going in. I have my plan, but now we get in there and it might be something totally different where now we have to pivot and kind of like make things happen. That, I think, to me is just unbelievable that you have the ability to do that and whatnot when it comes to your field. Not to mention all the training and the hours and the time that you put into, you know, at that high level, right? Because, you know, as a physician, you always got to be on. Like, you can't have off days, right? And I'm not even talking about just like a surgery specific. Like, you can't walk into a patient appointment and just, you know, kind of laissez-faire, whatever type thing. Like, you have to be on all the time. You know, I just think that's something that I don't think many people are built to do that. You know what I mean? It's just not, you're not programmed human nature to be on all the time like that. So that's why I think like the burnout rate of physicians is unbelievable, you know? Because I don't think most of them even take care of themselves on that level. They're so into the, like, just the rat race of what it is, that when do you take that deep breath, right? Like, I think that's why you see, like you said, 25 years, everybody takes a year off. Like, yeah, because by the time you get through everything you have to do to get to that point, right? Like, you've been going at it for years of on high, right? It's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, 25 years of maybe averaging 5 to 6 hours of sleep.
Wow.
You know, I mean, well, that's not even including my residency. There were times in my residency where I had to sleep in the hospital the entire week because I was up all the time, 36, 48 hours straight, and I couldn't drive home. But,
Yeah.
but you know, I had found out 2 years ago. I went to a doctor who's a functional medicine doctor, and I said, "How about we check my carotids out?" And because it's an easy test to look at what's called carotid intimal medial thickness. He's like, you know, Jim, we did that 10 years ago to you. I just go straight to doing a CAT scan of the coronary arteries. Now, meanwhile, you know, the last 5 years, I'm getting no sleep. I put on 20, 30 pounds. You know, I used to be into like bodybuilding and nutrition and stuff, but my diet went at the wayside. I started eating more carbs, less cardio. So sure enough, I get the cardiac scan and I have 70% obstruction of my left anterior descending artery in my heart. No symptoms, no chest pain, no symptoms.
Right.
But I had to come up with a plan, right? The doctor, I had to see a couple doctors. They came up with a plan for me to reverse it. But part of that was 2 to 3 hours of exercise almost daily, which given my schedule, I could never do. And then last January, right before, you know, I gave my resignation, you know, to go on sabbatical, in January, I was 180 hours in the OR straight over 2 weeks. And the next week I got routine blood checked and I was in kidney failure. My kidney function tests were off and I had protein in my urine. So it was essential that I take this time off,
right,
and address my health issues. And, you know, now it's amazing. When I first started, I couldn't even imagine sprinting on a treadmill. Now I go 30 minutes and every 3 minutes I'm doing 1 minute, getting my heart rate up to 170. I've gotten infusions to try to reverse, and I think it's all working. Next month, I'm going to go for another test. But again, it's crucial for doctors to be able to mitigate this burnout. A lot of the burnout comes from the corporatization of medicine and the administrative burden. Get rid of the burnout, right? But remembering you have to schedule in that time for yourself to be healthy, because you have to be a peak performer. Right? You have to be in tip-top shape on your game every day. And to do that, you have to take care of yourself, brain, body, soul, and spirit, right? And address all those, right?
No doubt.
Very, very crucial. And
I'm curious too, Doc. with some of the stuff that you've done with the sarcomas and even what you see like with the on the orthopedic side of with maybe even like athletes and those people that have been done surgeries underneath your group, is it are the cancers, are these random in most cases? Are they are there things that could cause it, that could contribute to it? Like what are you, are you, is some of it environmental? What are you seeing? Because that's always a big question people have, right? Is there something I can do to prevent some of these things from? And obviously, there's lots of different cancers, and you're focused in a certain area. But if you could kind of like talk a little bit about that, because people are always curious about that.
Yeah, so it seems to be sarcomas or musculoskeletal tumors seem to be random events. At least that's what we know right now. And that they're not heavily influenced by external factors. There are a few sarcomas that are related to some chemicals that you could be exposed to,
right,
etc. But they're more the rarer types of sarcomas. And the majority of sarcomas are not inherited. Like you don't come from a family that has a predisposition to it.
Right.
We do detect in the sarcomas genetic alterations.
Right.
Right. And we don't know why those genetic alterations occur or how they get turned on. So with anything in life, so I was just at a conference, they were talking about how 20% of disease is caused by genetics, but 80% is really by epigenetics, the stuff that happens in our environment that we do that influences the genetics. But sarcomas are so rare. There's only about 7,000 soft tissue sarcomas that occur in the United States each year. Derek had a soft tissue sarcoma, which was a little bit unusual in his age group. Most soft tissue sarcomas occur after the age of 50. And there's about 1,000 bone sarcomas that occur in the United States.
Right.
The most common bone sarcoma is osteosarcoma. And it's called an osteosarcoma not because it comes from bone, but because the sarcoma actually produces bone.
Right.
Right. So there's about 600, 700 cases in the United States a year in children and adolescents. And the majority of those cases occur during growth spurts. So we don't know if the cells are rapidly dividing and this genetic mutation occurs, which then leads to the osteosarcoma. And there's different types of genetic mutations that can all result in an osteosarcoma. Interestingly, humans get osteosarcomas in their hind limbs. Dogs get them in their forelimb more commonly, or their upper extremities, equivalent to our upper extremities.
Yep.
Right? Because more of their weight goes on their upper extremities, more of our weight goes on our lower extremities. Right? So
very, very interesting. Well, that's an interesting point, because you see, like, I have a 10-year-old, and you see so many of these kids that go through these growth spurts, and they have growth plate issues. They have obviously, growing pains is a part of it, but I see so much of it, and my son went through it a little while ago. Hopefully we're past it. Seems like we might be, but like I see so many kids that play on his teams, like on our youth football team. And this might sound crazy. We had 5 kids in the last year that had what's it called again? The thing that my son had in the heel.
His foot stuff.
Yeah,
Seaver's disease.
Seaver's. Yep.
5 kids on the team that had Seaver's disease that we know of for sure, where they told me, right? And other kids would be like, "Oh, my heel's bothering me," but it would go away. Maybe they had a minor version of it. But ones that really had to go and get treatment, 5 in the last year, which I thought was kind of I don't know if that's a lot or not a lot, but
they're active, right? They're playing sports. It's an inflammatory condition,
right.
But are they all wearing the same sneakers? Are they all?
And that's
that's
a question we have all the time, right?
We thought with our football players, it was the grass field that they were on that was affecting it, that maybe we had a high number of. Now, I didn't talk to other coaches that were on that same grass field to ask them if their kids are having problems, but we were at particularly in that age group, like 10, 11 age group, where maybe it happens more, right? I won't know until those guys next year are 10 and 11 when they might be going through that, as those kids are growing at the same time that they're on this kind of field, right? So like we went to, like, with all our kids that have it, we just told them, just don't wear cleats anymore, because cleats, like, me and Derek had this debate about cleats. Okay. And I think he's kind of on the same page with me on it, but like, it's like one of these necessary evils, right? They wear them for practice, but the way the cleats are made, because the kids want light cleats and they want them
just overall quality of
it's almost like they're wearing nothing, right? And they just have a plate underneath them that has studs under it, which obviously it's like wearing, to me, it's almost like wearing track and field spikes every day, right? Like when we run track and field, now I know elite athletes, they wear them, in practice, but their coaches know the workload level. Like, it's one of the things that people don't realize, like elite coaches, like, when a college coach says, yeah, we run spikes every day that we work out. Yes, they have load levels that they understand that are much lower, and then they take them off for whatever else they don't do, right? Whereas like younger levels and high school levels, those coaches are not as experienced with load levels, right? And nor should they be, right? They're probably not trained on that level like these guys are, and they're not dealing with it, as much, and they're dealing with many more people, right? It's less individualized. But I've come to this conclusion that, like, cleats are bad. Like, basically, to me, it's like wearing track spikes every single day in practice. But the difference in track is, like, your workouts, like you run and then you have a break, right? And I don't even think you should do them with young kids on track either, other than every once in a while. But in football, they're wearing it every single day, pounding it. And then you're expecting them to feel good, like their legs to feel good. And sometimes I'm sure, Derek might be able to speak to in high school. I haven't been in high school in 5 years as a coach, but do those kids feel those kind of things? I know at youth level, I just think it's crazy how much they wear cleats. It's crazy how often they're in no support land. And that might've been okay maybe years ago when their feet were always maybe on the ground more and they were built up the lower limbs to be able to do it. Now you have to consciously, I think I had to go do that with my own kid because I didn't know really anything about it, but like consciously kind of build up those areas because of the cleats wearing. I'm curious if you think that some of those things contribute to some of when they grow, their problems. I don't know, obviously, to go so far as to relate that it could be something like sarcoma. I don't think that's the case, but growth issues, do you see that as something that begins to happen and affects their bones and those things from that standpoint, that high stress?
Yeah, I mean, it affects them in the sense that it causes them pain and it interferes with their performance.
Right.
I think back to when I was a teenager. I was a catcher on the baseball team, and I had severe Osgood-Schlatter's disease, which is the same thing, but in the knee.
Right.
And it used to.
Which that was the trend when I was in school, right? Like Dave Seavers, like I can remember my teammates when I was at that age, everybody had Osgood-Schlatter's. Like everybody was wrapping right below the knee, with the band, because we couldn't, you know what I mean? But it was kind of something you hopefully grew out of, right? But I mean, it was just kind of the trend at that point, right? And I mean, catcher, Doc, like, you're squatting for how many innings a game and every day, back and forth, like brutal.
Yeah. I remember it used to torture me.
Yeah.
And then you developed a little bumps under your knees, which I still have.
Yeah.
Where the patella tendon attaches to. Yeah, I mean, it probably comes. It's probably multifactorial, with a lot of different potential causes, from shoe wear to the turf to the type of maybe exercises that the kids are doing, or if they're not stretching. Sometimes maybe just a little heel cup can make it feel better. A little neoprene heel cup could sometimes alleviate some of the pressure there, certainly stretching. But yeah, one thing though that you always have to think about, right, with children who have pain, because it's rare when you consider the amount of kids that have pain or injuries, right? It's astronomical. But a bone tumor or a sarcoma could be a cause, right? And when kids start waking up at night because they're having pain, or they start to develop swelling, or they're complaining of pain that doesn't go away in a week, they really need an X-ray. And if different things are then not seen on an X-ray, but different modalities are instituted to try to get rid of the pain and it doesn't go away, then they need an MRI. Because it's a classic story where the kid shows up with an osteosarcoma and was having pain for 3-4 months, and everybody kept telling him it's shin splints or it's from a minor injury. He said, "Oh, I tapped my knee on something," or something. It always gets dismissed as sports medicine injuries. Correct. And the earlier you treat them, the better the prognosis, obviously. Right. I even had a child that I took care of. Two children come to mind. One who was playing soccer. She tore her ACL and had an MRI, which showed a very, very small tumor in her femur, and it was read as a benign tumor. They did the ACL, and they ended up putting the ACL straight through the bone sarcoma. Needless to say, she didn't get better, experienced dramatic swelling, and 6 months later had an enormous mass around her knee. Ultimately died and had a strange, because the tumor was messed with, had a strange pattern of metastases that you normally wouldn't get. And another child I think of, he tore his rotator cuff, had his rotator cuff treated, surgery, went back to the office for a follow-up, few weeks later and was complaining of knee pain. Got an X-ray of his knee and he had an osteosarcoma in his tibia, right around the knee. So there's things that could be going on, and it doesn't come to light because of until other things happen,
right?
Or that are just dismissed, like, be quiet. You know what? You're just playing too much sports, or you're just running around too much, or you fell and you hurt yourself.
Right. I mean, ultimately, that's how mine was diagnosed, right? Like, I was senior year of college football, like, banged my arm in a game. Hey, there's this lump here, like, oh, it's a bruise. And then 2 months later, like, hey, this isn't going away. What is this? And, do some x-rays, do whatever. And it's like, hey, you need to go see Dr. Wittig, like, because we don't exactly know exactly what it is, but this is the route we think it is. And we kind of go from there. Right. So had that not occurred, like, that could have been in my right forearm for who knows, right? Because it's not like there was any, like, the pain came like when you like hit it or did something with it. Had that not happened, I probably wouldn't have known about it or would have just said, hey, like, this is nothing. It's not really bothering me. Like, just move forward. So it's spot on with what you're saying.
Yeah. I remember, I could still visualize your case during the surgery and everything. And your tumor was attached to the bone. Right. And it was relatively small compared to what it could have been. Right. Had that grown, it could have been destroying your bone.
Right.
I would have had to take out more soft tissue than I had to in your forearm, which would have compromised.
My range of motion. Like, and I say that to people all the time, just the immediacy of it. Like, hey, we're going to go in, we're going to see what it is first. Right. And then, okay, tests are done. And then, hey, 3 weeks, maybe a month later, hey, we're going to go back in and we got to make sure that we got everything within it. But the ability of, where it was, how it functioned, it was, hey, am I going to like have use of my arm, or am I going to be able to, use my hand and all of those types of things? And, here we are all these years later, and I'm fortunate I still have, full range of motion. I mean, there is nothing other than a light scar at this point from what it was, but had that not all occurred, who knows where it could have gone.
Exactly. Thank God, right? No nerves were involved.
Right.
Right. We got to it early and took care of it, and it was very successful. You didn't need radiation or anything like that.
Nope.
We didn't need to cut out pieces of bone and reconstruct the bone.
Right.
All which could have had much different outcomes, and
Right.
also could have put you at a higher risk of it spreading
Correct.
to other areas. And I attribute, you talked a little bit earlier about how well you handled the surgery, but I want to emphasize, like, your parents handled it very well.
Right.
And that's one thing that I notice is when the parents handle things very well, their children do also. When the parents don't, or there's discord that develops between the parents, the children do much worse.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's where again, the brain comes in, and the ability to deal with stress and deal with traumatic events. And I think, part of the reason why you did it, it's the way you were raised by your parents, but that was just innate in your parents, how to maintain a positive frame of mind and be happy throughout very challenging times and uncertainty.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And Dave, we talk about it, right? Like we talk about that all the time, how, the kid is what the parents are, especially at, the younger levels of, demonstrate what you want, because that's what the kids are hearing. They're ultimately going to go back to, well, my dad, well, my mom, my parents, like that direct correlation, you know what I mean? Like to an extent where, sometimes, the biggest, fastest, best kid is not the one you take on your team because his parents are a pain in the ass. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's literally that type of correlation where you understand that kid is what they're growing up around. And look, I'm fortunate that, those values and things were instilled at a young age. Is, it's kind of, next man up type of mentality where, it is what it is. This is a situation we can't control, but we're going to look to the positives of it, and you're in good hands and all that, like just reassuring of like the situation itself where, if there is that doubt or whatever, like they never showed it because they didn't want me to go into a different type of mindset. And I think it's so pivotal, whether it be parents or coaches, that you're always kind of there and you're honest and open about things, right? And communicate back and forth, because like you said, like you go into it and now all of a sudden it's a negative, right? Glass half empty outlook. Like, what is that going to do for us? Right? Like that's miserable. Like it's, you can handle that stuff behind closed doors where I don't see it, or the child doesn't see it.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember your family had already experienced tragedy with your cousin dying.
Right. And now look, that's one of those things too, like going back to what I said earlier, like people hear cancer and they think, oh, the worst of the worst. Like he had a different type of cancer, right? Leukemia, cancer of the blood. Like it's just so different than what a sarcoma was. It's all under the cancer, title, but it's not the same, right? Like, and to have had a loss like that happen from that in just 3 years prior, right? And now all of a sudden here I am dealing with a type of cancer that was tough with, everybody around me not comparing it to that, right? Like, hey, this is different. This isn't what it is. But again, because it's under that overall title of cancer, right? And I'm sure that's something you've had to deal with over and over again, of kind of explaining the certain cases that you're dealing with, that this isn't what that is, or don't compare and contrast because every patient and every case is different, right? Like don't put it under the generalizations that everybody wants to do. I think that's so key.
Right. And I have to tell everybody also, do not go online and read about it, because everything, you're going to hear a lot of bad things written, and everything is so specific for each individual patient, each individual diagnosis, each individual size of the tumor,
location, like how soon you get to it, and all, you know what I mean? And now with the way social media is, and just, anybody could, everybody thinks they could be a doctor because they can read about it, right? But those are like, what I mean? Like you said, it's case by case. And some of those are so specific because the craziest things get the most clicks and the most views and all of that stuff. And that's what pops up in your algorithm, right? Like that's not what it is for the most part. I mean, Dave, we do it all. We look at it all the time and just look at some of the stuff that's on social media, and parents come to us with this and we're kind of just in awe of like, that's like a 0.02% of what you're talking about, but that's what we see the most of. So they think that's what
Right.
it actually is. And it's really hard to
extreme.
combat that. Absolutely. Like,
Right.
you know,
Right.
like you can't compare yourself to an NFL wide receiver running a 4.3, right? When you're a 12-year-old kid, you know what I mean? And haven't even hit puberty yet, but you want to compare your time to that time. Like, apples to oranges, you know?
Yeah. Why isn't my kid there yet? Why isn't
Yeah.
my kid there yet?
You're like, well, he's got to tie his shoes first, and then we're good. Like,
Tying shoes, that's a whole different animal. We can do a podcast on the
well, it goes back to what we talked about, right? Like when we were growing up, everybody had a pair of sneakers and everybody wore sneakers. Now you look around, these kids are walking around in slippers and slides, and look, and now you want to talk about why you have knee pain or back pain at age 12 or 13. Like, well, the support from the ground up, like you're walking around in slides, flip-flops, sandals,
Right.
like non-supportive shoes all day, every day, right? Like it's we've had this discussion, and I brought it up to Dave. I'm like, dude, this is why our youth right now has like everything is, from the ground up, and they just walk around because they want to be comfy. Hey, like everything like comes, there's going to be repercussions to all that. Like, put on a pair of sneakers, buddy, and tie your shoes. Like,
Yeah. Exactly.
No doubt about it. Well, it's been awesome having you on, Doc. Like, really, really. I learned a ton. I probably if I sat down and wrote more questions down, I probably would have a million more, because there's so many directions that you go with things. But it's amazing listening to your career and your knowledge, and what you bring to human beings. I mean, really saving them. Like, there's no more noble profession, you know what I mean, than being a doctor, and
Totally
especially what you're doing, where you're really, in some cases, trying to help somebody in a situation that otherwise might be a really, really desperate situation, right? So it really, really is amazing. You when you're in the profession, just like when you're in any profession, like, and you're surrounded by people that are in your profession, you don't realize how much people really appreciate the things that you do, because it's so, because you're in it, you know what I mean? But doctors, like you, and what you do in particular, it really change lives, change trajectory of people's lives, save lives, give people hope if they're in a situation where they're maybe, I mean, I sad to say, but sometimes you extend somebody's opportunity for a longer life,
no doubt. Quality of life, right? Like, I mean, we're talking surgeries where, like, you might not have a leg, and now all of a sudden, hey, you're good. You can still run track in high school, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
you're still alive.
Like that type of situation. Like, without that, like, totally different view on life, if a life, right? So
people used to say to me, how do you deal with this? Isn't it depressing? And I said, no, not really, because almost everybody who comes in, even if they're in horrible situations, are happy to see me because I'm helping them in some way.
Right.
And and I certainly see many, many horrible situations, but it's always very pleasant interactions. And, even if it's improving, I could be taking care of a 70-year-old who has metastatic cancer and his bone's all over, and they've needed the surgery, or their bone is broken and I fixed it. And, I know, right, they're not going to be cured. They're going to pass away at some point, but we're going to keep them going and keep them moving and keep them, give them the best quality and least pain in their life until that happens. And they're appreciative, and they come in, and it's a very pleasant experience. But naturally, like when a child dies who has cancer, a little piece of my heart leaves, right? It's like a piece of my heart gets plucked out. They're probably the most special patients that I take care of. But again, my purpose in life is to use my skills and the knowledge that I have to help these patients as best I can. And when that happens, right, if God it's in the end, it's all up to God, right? It's not up to me, right? It's all up to what God's will is. So So that's how I think about things. Yeah, but I wanted to thank you. This was wonderful. I could stay on here with you guys for probably 4 hours. I'm having so much fun talking about this.
Doc, I appreciate it, man. I know your schedule's crazy, and I really appreciate you taking the time. Obviously, everything that you've done for me, my family, just even all the patients that I know have interacted with you after. Like it's crazy how like Dave, there's so many people that are like, oh, I'm seeing Dr. Wittig, and I'm like, oh, you're set. Like, you're all good, right? Like, and young athletes, right? Like, family members, acquaintances, just like how it's come full circle, with having met Doc in the beginning. So, Doc, I appreciate it, man. Enjoy, continue to, do God's work. You know what I mean? Little time off, which I know will not be time off in your world because you're nonstop, all go all the time. But really appreciate you taking the time and letting our viewers kind of get into that world a little bit. So appreciate you.
Thank you very much, guys. It was really a pleasure, and it's great seeing you, Derek. And you don't know how much pleasure it brings me and fulfillment to have gotten to taking care of you, and for your parents to have trusted me so much. And really, I had a wonderful relationship with your parents. I vividly remember your dad, and he was a police officer like my father and brother. And
yep.
And it's really been great to see you grow up and be successful.
Appreciate it, buddy.
And anything that I can do, I'm always here.
Always. Thanks, Doc. Appreciate you, man. Enjoy.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Talk soon. All right, buddy.
Bye. That was awesome.
Dude, wow. Wild. He downplays a lot of it too, but if you do any research, it's incredible, dude.
It is. That's incredible. It's incredible what he just did with you. I mean, but obviously there's thousands of cases.
Like mine was like easy peasy compared to some of the stuff. Right. Like, and obviously, like, I don't know. Like, again, we could have sat on that forever.
That girl he was talking about. I wanted to just cry right there. I mean, it's
brutal. And like, think about dealing with because a lot of times, and look, he referenced it a little bit, but that's what happens is like someone will tear an ACL. And all of a sudden they take a scan and then they find the tumor. And now it gets shifted from ACL repair, orthopedic, to now it goes to him. And now he has to go and explain, okay, this is what's going on. This is how it is. You know what I mean? So like to be doing that day in, day out, on top of like running in a department within a hospital and handling a budget and doing all this stuff. Like, I mean, look, he didn't even touch on the personal aspect of some of the things that he's done, in terms of like adopting a son that had lost both parents to cancer, or, and just like, fulfilling that role as like, he talks about being a human. And I've said it how many countless times, like you win with people ultimately. Right. And I just think that's how it works. Right. Like you do good to others and, good will be bestowed on you. Right. So to just always keep that in the forefront, and to know that you have someone in the medical field at that level that kind of believes in that, like a patient first type of, in a world that's now so business like, bottom line, to just have that, especially in someone that's like taking care of you, I think is like, you want to talk about the mental side of like being in a positive limelight, knowing that guy's working to take care of you, like changes the game. And I don't think that's the case for most people, because everybody has an opinion of this is what a doctor is or what they're supposed to be. And like, he is what it's supposed to be. You just wish it would happen more, but it is the nature of the beast.
No doubt about it. Is 100% the nature of the beast. It's an incredible thing. It's fascinating, obviously, what he does. I'm curious, as medicine continues to change and evolve, like.
And how about that? Like, he's on board with all that. Like, let's go. Like, how can I use AI to help me? How can I, you know what I mean? Like,
I read these, like, I have this, it must be some like Facebook group I'm subscribed to or something,
Right.
So I get like news every day, or on like updated stuff with like cancer but all different things, like a lot of things. I must be like some sort of medical technology thing, because it's like always like over here they use CRISPR to cure this and in test trials, but it's amazing because there's all these things going on,
right,
that I would guess within the next 10, like if you could live till the next 10 years, if you can make it 10 years, there's a lot of things that probably will go either go away or manage. Like, I mean, think about who would have thought in the 1980s and 90s that HIV would basically be
Gone.
I mean, if they get it, they live a normal life. There's no such thing as like them dying anymore.
Right, because that was the death sentence, right?
Right, unless they don't get treated, I guess. But most people, you know, they'll get treated.
I don't. Is it even like? Do people even get it? You know what I mean? Like, think about it, right?
You know,
like,
yeah, maybe because it's
you get from going watching videos in school and spending hours and hours looking at it, right? To now it's like, wait, that's a thing, or that was something like
when I was in college, that was something you were very like. I'm not kidding. You know, people talk about like, not to get in a sexual talk here, but people talk about condoms, you know, like with the whole Olympic things, everything, really more from a sexual transmitted disease. They're not really talking about HIV. You know what I'm saying?
No, yeah.
When I was in college, it was really like that was the early 90s. That was really like, not only were you protect yourself from those things, but you were really trying to protect yourself in case somehow you had sex with someone that had HIV. Like, literally, like, that was really scary. By time it got to when you were in college, it was pretty much all but gone. Not the disease was gone, but like it was less of an issue. And now it's completely not at all an issue. But it's amazing. Like, that's just one thing. But the advances in medicine, at the rapid rate that it's happening, especially with AI and some of these other things.
Right. I mean, we could have talked about that. Just editing, how the advances from when we started to like the technology and to kind of how it goes about. I mean, even that in itself, like, you look at I was dealing with that stuff in 2008. It's almost 20 years later now, just the changes in what that aspect of it is, rather than, you know, whether it be the diagnosis or the actual surgery progression of, you know, some of the things that he did early to now. Like, that could be a podcast in itself of how technology has, you know, helped, you know, to kind of advance all of that stuff. Like, and I think technology itself in the medical world is something that's so innovative. I mean, because, you know, if you think about like some of the things, like, it's always like like healing people is based around the technologies and our ability to do things, right? Or find a tool that can help us do this, right? Like, everything is involved with technology when it comes to the medical field. You know, at some point, a scalpel was a piece of technology. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely. I mean,
like, and now you're going to where like you can like stop the heart but still be alive and do something so that now you can, like, just that, and it, like, all of those things. Like, I don't know, if you're a doctor, how can you not be on the side of like technology of like, hey, let's go, right? I mean, he talked about it in an even, I love that. Like, hey, I don't need to be doing paperwork. I need to be focused on my patients, right? And some of that stuff you get so bogged down with, like, and you don't even, I mean, and then to go into the general health now, that right.
Can, I mean, they could do a lot of different things, but they're I don't know where I read they were testing it. It might have been Germany, but they have gene editing. So like people who have one of the sad things about like Down syndrome, right? Because you can test for it.
Yep.
Most of those babies now get aborted now. They don't get,
because people don't want to.
Now they have, with gene editing, it's been tested in some other countries. They're able to edit the genes, so they no longer are going to have Down syndromes, I guess. In the
pretty much, because people will eliminate it now that they know.
And now those babies,
if that's what you believe in.
I mean, it's so sad. I mean, that's so sad to me that, like,
I mean, especially for me, that hits home with a cousin who has Down syndrome, right? I to see how amazing she is, right? And look, that's why I got into special ed, right? Like, that world is just so, you know, but now with the way technologies are and knowing those things, like, the burden it puts on, you know, parents and all that to raise that or live that life of, look, I know my cousin at 30, whatever, is always going to be attached to my aunt till the day she dies. And that's her being extremely high functioning and doing a lot of things independently. But
there's a beautiful thing in that. But the scary part with Down syndrome is not, I always say, not while the parent is alive, because if you have a good parent, they're going to love them. It's when they're no longer alive.
Of course.
They're on their own and they have to
Right.
be on their own. And that's very, very difficult for people with Down syndrome.
See what's wild about my
depending on their
family.
level.
Right. And which is crazy because, you know, my cousin is a twin, one who has Down syndrome, one doesn't. So ultimately, like, you know, her brother is like, yeah, like I'm going to be taking care of her forever. Right. As soon as mom goes, like, we got it. But that's, you know what I mean? Like to just, you look at it like that, and that's, you know, she's extremely high functioning. You know what I mean? Like holds down a job, takes the bus every morning. You know what I mean? Like, wow, this is amazing. But still, like you look at some of those things, just technology is wild. But I always just felt that, like in the medical field, technology is unbelievable for the things that it can help with and do. Right? Absolutely. Like because otherwise, like it's why life expectancy has increased so much. Right? Is because we now know things that without technology we would never know. And I love that he talked about too, like the foundation of everything is like, you got to take care of yourself. Like even me, you know, as you know, like him talking about himself, like I had to go get, like, I got some tests done and it was like, dude, like, this is not good. We got to fix something or we got to change something. Like you see the burnouts of what these guys go through in order to put others and help others. Like ultimately you have to take care of yourself first or you can't be good for anybody. So for him to prioritize that, I think is so, because some of those guys will just run themselves into the ground.
Yeah, I tell you, like the doctor that I went to, my general practitioner, most of the doctors I go to, they're really nice, but they're not like trying to figure out like, hey, how can we help you with your longevity?
Right? No.
I had a guy who just happened to go there because I wasn't like did all the tests. He's like, your tests are normal, but you know, in 10 years, that's going to change if you don't change things, right? So
so you got to start to like
did a bunch of things, and it worked. It honestly has worked tremendously so far,
right?
And but it's you obviously you as a person has to be willing to do it, but but doctors can help you make those decisions. And you're right, like the bedside manner, the comfort level to be able to talk, like developing that trust.
It's huge.
It's very, very important with the doctor. And there's some doctors that are like phenomenal, like let's say surgeons, but they struggle to talk to people.
Personal aspect. They just don't. It's just not
their trust. You know.
Yeah, it's just. And look, the fact that he stresses that, right, I think puts his patients already above others in that they already feel that like that anxiety level is already lessened because there's going to be some level of anxiety, especially dealing in his field, right? No matter what, but to calm that from the jump, like ultimately makes his job easier, right? Because now everything else kind of follows suit and you don't have an overreactor or an overthinker of like, now this person's calling me all the time because about this or that or whatever. Like he puts it at ease to begin with and kind of sets him on that path of like, it's going to be okay. Just trust me and go. Right. And I get it. That's really, really hard for someone to understand and do that. But just that he approaches it in that manner already takes it to a different level.
No doubt. Great podcast. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. Quick question. Can we go at 11 tomorrow?
Tomorrow we're going at 12, actually.
Oh, that works out great. Okay, great.
We're going at 12 tomorrow. We have Lindsay Wilson. So she's big in the field of she deals with a lot of the mental health aspect of things and whatnot, and talking with people in that regard. I mean, her stuff, it's literally Lindsay Positive Perform, right? So mental performance coach and all that stuff. And she played pro hoops. So be good to talk to her.
Very, very, very cool. Very cool.
Awesome. All right, buddy. At least you don't have to dig any more snow.
Oh, yes. I didn't have to work out after that. I'll tell you that.
No,
my back, I had to go sit in that. I have that inversion thing for my back.
Yeah. Go back. Yeah.
I just had it, I think 3 times yesterday.
Hey, whatever works, buddy. Whatever
dude,
works.
I'll tell you, I'm telling you, if I had to do something like that before I had this, and I did that, and it didn't have to, even if I stretched after, I'm telling you, I would have woke up and nope. I go in that. I did stretch and all that stuff after because normally I'm not really even stretching. I went in that inversion thing, did my stretching, went the inversion thing again. I'm telling you, I'm a little sore, but It is amazing. Now, if you don't have back problems, it doesn't matter. But,
But
like,
I think I don't think it's important. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
it's
again, we're
amazing,
talking about
dude.
preventative, whatever. Just because there's not an issue right now doesn't mean that there won't be an issue in like, you know what I mean? Like, come on now.
It's all even more to my back, which is really my neck. Obviously, always has issues just from obviously tackling, and especially the way I think about how we tackled. Oh my God, I probably put my head on the ball so many times.
Well, think about it. At least you were like kind of the same size of guys you were tackling.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
mostly.
I'm like, hey,
I'm even bigger in most cases.
I'm like, hey, just so you know, like I was always the smallest guy on the field. You know what I'm saying? And like, it was the human body's not meant to run into people full speed and try and knock them down. Like, it's just not how we're built. So, and we didn't exactly have the best helmet and shoulder pads that we were working with either. You know what I'm saying?
Well, we had battering rams as helmets. Those were battering. And my shoulder, that's why I had.
Look, it's why I have a strong neck. I think still to this day, I was wearing that heavy ass helmet for like, you know, majority of my life. But it's sure as hell like, you know, these new helmets, buddy. Whoa. Like,
people like, why'd you have big shoulder pads? That's why we had big shoulder pads.
Oh, I used to get that all the time. They're like, but why are your shoulder pads so big? I said, because I'm hitting someone bigger every play. Like, do you understand that? Like, I need something there, dude. Like, you know, like,
it's not like now. It's not like
right.
Now.
Totally different. But hey,
right,
it's all good. A little bit of a different workout, right? It's not going to the gym. It's not doing this. You're working some of this, some of that. And you know, you can say you shoveled out Blizzard of 2026. Amen.
No doubt. All right,
man. Talk to you later.
All right, bye.